Once again, thank you for joining us today for our first Curator Conversations of 2021. Today's event is a historian how-to workshop featuring the museum's oral historian, Mr. Luke Sprague, and he's going to be talking about how to use PastPerfect 5.0 for cataloging oral histories and looking up those oral histories. If I could just remind everybody, if you have any questions for Mr. Sprague for the end of the program, please submit your questions via the chat function. We will be getting to all those questions at the end of the program. And then I would also like to thank the Wisconsin Veterans Museum Foundation, and particularly Ms. Jen Carlson, for all their continued support in offering this free programming for everybody. They do a fantastic job of supporting our programming here at the museum. And I'm sure sometime within the program, we will be posting a link to the foundation's website. If you have any questions for the foundation, or if you'd like any more information about the foundation, you can certainly get it that way. So once again, thank you to the Wisconsin Veterans Museum Foundation for their continued support. We greatly appreciate it. We would not be able to do this programming without their help. As I said just a moment ago, today's first curator conversation of the year is a historian how-to workshop. And we're going to be looking at how to use PastPerfect 5.0 for cataloging oral histories. And it's going to be presented today by our museum's oral historian, Mr. Luke Sprague. Luke, I'm going to turn it right over to you. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Eric, for the kind introduction. And I'm going to go ahead. Can I'm assuming you can all hear me well. And I'm going to go ahead and begin the course. So this is a class on how to use PastPerfect 5.0 for cataloging oral histories. And I'm the oral historian, Luke Sprague, with the Wisconsin Veterans Museum. Let's see here. We are a Department of Veterans Affairs program within, so it's the Wisconsin Veterans Museum as part of the Department of Veterans Affairs for the state of Wisconsin. And we are the oral history program within that museum. The museum's mission is to commemorate, acknowledge, and affirm the role of Wisconsin veterans and Americans' military past and present. And how that plays out is every veteran is a story for us. And within that, the oral history program's mission is to document the experiences of Wisconsin veterans and let the veterans tell their story in their own words. So that's just a little bit about us. A couple program facts about the Wisconsin Veterans Museum Oral History Program. We have Spanish American War veterans talking about their experiences all the way up to today. We are one of the larger oral history programs in the country. We have over 2,200 oral histories, and even more than that, depending on how you count. So we are a substantial program and an ongoing program. The way our program is set up, we do intake 3 basic different ways. We have our individuals who we interview using both volunteers, using LTEs and other people and employees to bring in the interviews. We also have what are called project oral histories, or oral history projects. So that is another means of how we get oral histories into the collection. We also, throughout the state of Wisconsin, because we're focused on Wisconsin veterans and Wisconsin connected veterans, are collection based. So we will also receive collections from other museums, other libraries, and take those into our collection as appropriate. So, and then the last bullet point, of course, is making those interviews available to the public. And that is part of what we're doing today by cataloging and making them available, in this case, on the internet to the public so that they can access them. So cataloging is a necessary part of that. And what we're going to be showing you today are our internal cataloging processes with PastPerfect, which is also public facing. So I want to thank PastPerfect for allowing us to make this video today, and hopefully you will find this interesting. So we're going to be cataloging oral histories with PastPerfect 5.0. And our goal for this workshop is to cover how to create a complete oral history record using PastPerfect 5.0. So this is the client-based PastPerfect as opposed to the cloud-based PastPerfect. So we're using PastPerfect 5.0. I'm sure a number of you are familiar with that program out there. Workshop structure, to go over it quickly. We're going to go through creating the objects. We're going to go through creating the fixed fields and look at then what PastPerfect calls each of the screen views within PastPerfect 5.0, which are the archive screen view, the oral history screen view, the custom screen view, the location screen view, the notes and legal screen view, and then we're going to go into subjects, classifications, and the search terms screen view. So we're going to go all the way down into each of these pieces of metadata, take a look at them, and go over them with this application. We're also, as part of our process, going to create a people record that's going to link to that archival/oral history record. And we're going to flip back and forth between the archival record and the people record. It's important that you understand that I'm going to use both oral history record and archival record. But for most of us, it's just one type of an archival record within it. We'll finish the people record in 3 parts, and I'll go over why that's important as we get through this. I'm going to show you how to upload a photo into that archival record, and then we're going to go through the process of making it accessible to the public. In our case, we happen to use PastPerfect Online, and I'll show you how to push that record out. To review the record, we'll go through that, update of the status for that record, the oral history record, and then making the record live. Some housekeeping. I'm going to use the show and tell method. I'm going to show you how we're doing it, and then I'm going to ask for you to hold your questions to the end, and we'll try and answer your questions at the end. For those of you who are PastPerfect experts, we're not going to be doing batch processing. We're going to be doing one at a time processing today. So we're going to learn the basic techniques and properties and then go from there. So a couple things to be aware of. These are customizations that we use and we find works for us. So as they used to say in the 1970s, the mileage may vary. So you may have techniques and nomenclatures that work for you. Absolutely. These are what work for us, and we're just sharing that with you. The other thing to be aware is if you're looking at some of this data today and you're like, this metadata, and you're like, wow, that's silly or goofy, it's because it's dummy data. So you're going to see bits and pieces of different data. All the data that is up here is publicly accessible and available for the public to look at. But we're going to use different pieces just to protect the innocent. So let's go on. So we're going to go to the PastPerfect trainer, and I'm going to fire this up right now, hopefully. Screen sharing is stopped. Hold on. Let's see here. Share screen. Hold on a moment. Let's see here. Okay. Now, let's try that. Okay. So y'all should be seeing a screen, hopefully, of the PastPerfect 5.0. This is our training version. So those of you who are PastPerfect experts will be aware of this. And we're going to use this simply to help guide us through the process of creating an oral history record in our case. So we'll start off. The first thing we're going to do, this is after you've fired up the application, PastPerfect 5.0, you'll come to this screen. The first thing I'm going to do, and you have to keep in mind, we're going to be focused just on oral history records today. So I'm going to go to Archives in this case. And you are going to see, I'm going to show you here an example of an oral history record. It's an archival record, basically. And a couple things you should be aware of in PastPerfect, if you're not familiar with them, are you are guided across the top with adding a new record, browsing records, editing records, spell checking, query, finding, and delete. Also media links. And then if you want to get back out to the main menu, which is probably the most important thing if you're confused about it at all, is to hit this exit button over here, and that takes you back out. If you're ever in doubt, hit exit, and that will back you out. So we're looking right now at a record, a dummy record for Joan Z. Smith. And another way to look at this, so that the people who are used to working in the archives, is you can use the browse button here. The browse button will take you out, and you'll notice that there are different type of archival records, and we use object IDs to provide them with unique identifiers. And so you'll notice for the oral histories, and this is what we standardized on a number of years ago before I got here, is OH, and then a space, and then a 0, and then the number. And that's how we uniquely identify our oral histories in our collection. Now, if I want to look at one of these records, I can simply click on it, right-click on it, and it'll bring it up. So here's Sammy G. Fields, and this is his oral history record. And if I want to go between records on that list that you just saw, here's the list, and it's a short list today. I will simply use this, move up, move down one record, okay? And that's a good way to do it. So a couple other things to keep in mind. When I talk about the fixed fields, I'm talking about in PastPerfect 5, the top of the screen. When I'm talking about screen views, I'm talking, they're down the left side here. And you'll see, and I mentioned this in the beginning, you can toggle through different screen views by pressing on these buttons, and they will bring up different pieces of information in those screen views, okay? And if they are populated, they will have this green dot in them, okay? So we're gonna go through this sequentially, and I'm gonna show you how to do this. And we're just gonna start with one record and keep going from there. Okay, if I'm starting out and I wanna do an oral history record, I'm gonna start out in the upper left here. And one of the things I'm gonna do as the archivist, or the oral historian in this case, is I'm gonna look and find out what my next available number is, okay? So I can see it's gonna be 4,157. So that's the naming structure that we use. So I'm gonna press this button up here in the upper left. It's called the Add button, okay? And once you have this, this is probably one of the harder parts of doing this. It's very straightforward. But once you've created this object record, then you can go from there, and then things become substantially easier. So I'm going to click on Add, and I'm going to say to myself, okay, enter the object ID. I'm going to go ahead and type in OH 04157, which is the next available number in my case, okay? And in this case, we're going to use what's called a lexicon, which you should have work with your PastPerfect administrator, which is probably somebody within your organization. you're going to want to talk to them about this. So let me back out here. I'm going to click onto lexicon here. And then in my case, I'm going to scroll down on this. And hold on a minute. And you'll see there's different objects in here, different types of objects. So in our case, for our lexicon and our museum, what we've decided to do is we've decided to make oral history an object. Okay, sorry. And if you look over here on the left, you'll see that it chooses tools and equipment for communication. You're categorizing it here in the lexicon. Communications equipment, communication media, and oral history. So I'm going to click on this twice. You'll notice that this then populates this field. So we're going to name all of our oral histories that object name. Okay, that'll help us out later. So I'm going to hit that button, and I'm going to hit this gray button, which is called Add New Record, and I'm going to go ahead and add it. Okay, so we're going to do another record here. So let's go. We're going to start out, and in our case, we name the collection after the individual, and we create individual collections for each individual individual history. So we're going to go Jill K. Smith. I'm going to type this in quickly. And in looking at this, because I don't want to lose things, I'm going to go ahead and hit save, just because I want to keep the record and I don't want to come back and do this twice. And I'm a touch paranoid, so I'm going to hit save. Okay. Keynote here. When you see the fields not populated with yellow highlighting, you're no longer in the edit mode, you're in the view mode. Okay. So important to know, and this frustrates people when they're first starting out with PastPerfect sometimes, is they think they can just start typing, and you can't. It's read only. So you have to put it into edit mode. So we're going to go through. The collection's name is Jill K. Smith, and we have an object ID, so we know what unique identifier it has and what type of object it is. Reference code, old number, these are things you can do to reference former databases. So let's say you're porting in an old database. You could bring that information into one of these fields. I want to say it's usually old number, but you're going to have to talk to your PastPerfect administrator. For accessions, we have our PastPerfect administrator come back and do the accession afterwards. Because in our case, we assume that if you have the oral history, that you're going to assess it and you're going to bring it in. And that's a decision that we made as a group. Home location. Home location is where the original is located. We're going to come back to this later, and we're going to populate this field a different way. So I'm going to go to the next available field, which is date. I need to edit. I need to put in the information. So I'm going to hit edit. You'll notice the top of the screen here goes yellow, or there's this yellow highlight. It'll always go there. So in our case, we're going to go ahead and put in the date of the interview. So let's say I interviewed Jill on last Christmas Eve, okay? And you'll notice the date is, in our case, for the way we're set up, is month, day, year. So it's important to get those in correctly, because otherwise your database administrator, your PastPerfect administrator, or your registrar will come back to you and say, you put in bad data, clean it up. So, so we interviewed her then, okay? And let's say she's an Iraq veteran. So let's say 2003 through 2005, yeah, let's ballpark it, okay? So there's a bunch of subjective decisions made here. In our case, we use the year range for a subjective measure of when the most important time for that person was in their history as a veteran. It could be in wartime, it could be that specific piece that we're interested in. For instance, if it were a Vietnam veteran in this case, so I'm going to change the data here. We might cover, and we'll go a year both sides. So let's say they served in 69. We'll go 1970. And the purpose of that is to kind of help us think about where that important service was or combat service was. It may not be combat service. It's whatever's the most relevant. So that's a decision that we've made. Catalog date. So the catalog date is today. So I'm the cataloger and we allow that to auto-populate, okay? So we're gonna leave that in there and I'm gonna go on and I'm gonna say, we're gonna do who cataloged it. Now the initial cataloging is just that, and that's what gets populated here. Now you'll see in, let me show you here. You'll notice the field's yellow, so left click, and keep this in mind, this is an important one. Right click brings up the authority file. And for those of you who don't know what an authority file is, an authority file just tells you these are the acceptable values to have in there, okay? And you can later add people, have discussions with your PastPerfect administrator. But in this case, they have a bunch of simulated users here, and they've got my name in here. So I'm going to go ahead and click 2 left clicks. That populates the field for me. Status, we're going to come back to, and we're not going to handle that right now. So and you'll understand why here in a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and save because we're done with that part. Okay. And then I'm going to go on to the archive screen view, and you can see as you look across here, there are various different tabs, context, and you just click on them to bring them up. It's really easy. Okay. So for us, we use the description, and one of the other things you need to be aware of in PastPerfect and cognizant of is many of these fields map to other fields in other collections. And you can be involved in that and administer how that works with your administrator. So what we would usually call a description for an object is also usually maps to the scope and content. So you probably want to have these discussions about what you want to go where if you haven't already. So in our case, we, for our oral histories, write up a summary or an abstract, and we're going to go ahead and put that in here. So I'm going to left click, I'm going to hit edit to get it to go yellow. Notice the top window goes yellow, not down here where I was. When I click in it, it comes up, and then I'm going to hit control. So you can know off screen, I have some simple plain text files that I'm simply copying and pasting from. So one possible technique is Control C on a Windows machine, Control V for the paste. The other thing to keep in mind when you're working in PastPerfect, and the reason why I use plain text files is because it eliminates the necessity of bad characters being in your text. If you have additional carriage returns, if you have characters that are not legal for the program, the plain text will kind of help you eliminate that. So I've just done a Control C off screen. I'm going to do a Control V and do a paste. And you can see it brought in a text to a different person here for their summary. Okay. So that handles that. You'll notice it's still yellow. I'm going to keep it yellow, and I'm going to go over here to title. And all I'm going to do is cut and paste so we're not typing the whole time here. So you can just see how this process works. So we have a standardized title that we use for oral histories. So it could be an oral history interview with Rochelle Lopez for the I Am Not Invisible project. So that is for a project within our collection. You could also just have, we'll show you another one here, an oral history interview with Tom Blumenberg. This is just what we've standardized upon, okay? So the next thing I'm going to look, you're going to see a lot of standardizations, and your museum or your archives or your library is going to be different, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It is what it is. So we're going to do extent and medium. This, in our case, is it is a written description for a reader to understand it. It's not the perfect metadata that you're used to. So generally what we'll say is digital video recording, 3 MP4 files, 3 hours and 4 minutes. These are not the detailed minute counts. And it could be an audio, just like this. And that tells the reader who's reading the catalog what this is, for the most part. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. We're still on this first archive tab here. And in our case, because we're focused on veterans' stories and veterans' experiences, we tend to try and group them by conflict or war. And so we use that as one of our authority fields to help us parse out what goes where. It doesn't always work, but it's one way of doing it. So I'm going to left click. Again, you'll see the field turn yellow. And then I'm going to right click. And that will bring up my authority fields. So in this case, this is definitely a shortened version, okay, because it is for this sample. So we're going to say the person served in Operation Iraqi Freedom. So, or Jill did. And I'm going to do 2 left clicks, and you'll see that it auto-populates here. You could have a number of events here. You could have different types of events depending on what you're using to help define your collection, okay? This works for us. So I'm going to hit save just because that gets me my first tab done. And then we're going to keep going through this here. Let me see here. Sorry. A little housekeeping. Okay. In our case, you'll notice when I flip to the context tab, this stays with us. The description and the scope stays with us. We don't use, in our case, in our collection within the oral history collection, we don't use the structure. We don't use the conditions of use. We do use the allied materials. So there's a number of ways that we do this, and it's actually changed. So we're going to go in here and click. Okay. In the existence and location of originals, in our case, I am literally going to point to the original recording. So in our case, the way we do this is we have an identifier, a unique identifier. And I'll explain this to you here quickly. So what this tells me is, from left to right, building S or room S100 in the safe, north column, 7th shelf, seventh row, column 1, or shelf 1, sorry. And then you'll notice this colon here. Yours can be completely different. Box 1, container 10. Within container 10, it is object 10. So in our case, because we're using micro SDs, I'm going to hit a carriage return. Make sure your carriage returns between the 2 lines are clean. Otherwise, your PastPerfect administrator will get after you. Control V. And in this case, I'm going to tell you, and this is our file naming structure that we've agreed upon years ago, oral history 2176.ben That tells me that person's family or surname. There's one file, and in this case, it's the original recording. So this is what we agreed upon years ago. That's where we're at. So we'll go from there. The next most important thing of doing this and taking care of these histories is documenting where the preservation master, where the mezzanine, if you have one, and where the copies are and the access copies are. So we're going to go ahead and I'll show you that here. And the first one you're going to notice they're different names. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the preservation master. This is the first, of course, copy of whatever this was. And that's where that goes. If you have, and I'm giving you, the network path. For us internally, I'm saying P drive, oral history folder, master files, here it is. I'm literally pointing to it, okay? So I'm trying to be explicit. If you have a mezzanine, sometimes you'll do that depending on what you're doing. And then our access file, which is usually the first step in public access. And these could all be in different locations too, that happens. You'll notice this is on the K drive and it's now an MP3. So we've made adjustments. You'll also see maybe we made some security CDs or CDs for the user or their family. In this case, for our oral histories, we do that because that was part of our agreement with them. So here it is. And in this case, those CDs, physical media, we literally tell them, okay, Wisconsin Veterans Museum Research Center, shelf, and I give you the location again, here it is, shelf row 31, column 2, shelf 6, and it is in box 64, and there's just one. And I'm telling you the file type in this case, okay? We'll also in this case tell you if we sent something to the user. This is kind of a one-time thing that we do for our narrators, okay? Related units, we don't use this field. Associated material in other repositories, we don't use this field. I'm going to go to the next tab, description control. Okay, in archivist's name, sometimes we'll put people in there, sometimes we won't. It just depends. It isn't a critical field, but we can do that, and we can put my name in there, we can put anybody's name in there, and that can also be a controlled field, okay, for that first person. But generally we don't use it. So we're going to go on. Archivist notes, the way we use it in our case is these are internal notes to the archivist, and these are not publicly showing. You will want to discuss with your PastPerfect administrator what fields are showing and what fields are not. And you'll want to probably have a discussion amongst, if you have multiple people in your museum, what you want showing and not showing if you're going to do that, if you're going to provide online access. So as we provide this, these are going to be our internal notes for the archivist. Was born digital, recorded with the Tascam, one WAV file, 48 by 24 bits, and there's just one file existing in this case. There could be multiple files. There could be a whole bunch of different types of information here. So the other thing that we will place here, generally what you're looking for is, you're looking for technical data. In our case, that's what we use this field for. And that'll vary over time too, but that's what we've standardized upon. So here's a video, born digital, recorded on a Canon Vixia camcorder, one DVD, containing, in this case, 2 MP4 files, okay? And then you'd have the time and then the space. The identification of separate media, of course, tells the archivist I should be looking for 2 DVDs, not one. And the size of it tells us, in a most general sense, if there's been an alteration or a change, but only in the most general way. So the other thing that goes here is if something happened. Okay, so, and we'll usually have initials with it. In this case, they're mine, saying, a train drove by during the interview, unable to prevent noise. So it could be the recorder stopped, whatever the case is. This is where we're going to put those internal archivist's notes. So I'm done with this tab. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Okay. And I'm going to keep moving ahead. In our case, for our collection, we don't use map. We don't use music collection. We then go to oral history. So in this case, we've had a standard that we've historically gone with. So we're going to go down here and I'm going to go to recording media. And we have a bunch of different things here. A DVD, a videotape, open reel, vinyl, an LP. And I'm going to say it's a digital recording. And that's just what we've standardized. That may change in the future, but that's what we're doing right now. So in this case, again, this is more for public consumption and looking out. I'm going to tell you what it is. I'm going to say it's a digital recording. And I'm going to say there are 2 video files. Okay. So again, this is just kind of a description, a general description. Working with an oral history, there's some really important pieces of information in addition to the metadata. We're going to want to say, okay, who was the narrator? Well, in this case, we know who it was. It's Jill K. Smith. So I'm just going to type that in. Our interviewer was this gentleman, Furell Edgar Smith. And we're going to say the interview place. In this case, we're just going to say it was Wausau, Wisconsin. You could also say narrator's home, but not their address. So you want to give them the information that that's where it happened, but not the street address, because this is going to be publicly facing. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and put the date in here, and this the date of the interview. And let's see, we interviewed her on 12/24/2020. Okay, so the length of the interview. Now, of course, in our case, as an oral history, it's very important that we have good data as best as we can. So we're going to say it was 1 hour and 35 minutes and 4 seconds. Okay. Again, in this case, hour, minute, second. We don't use hundredths of second in our case for this piece of data. We're just down to seconds. Okay, date the donor signed the form. We do use a deed of gift. Generally, that's signed the same day, almost as a rule. And we will put that in there. Okay, transcriptionist, another valuable piece of data for the archivist and the collection. So this could be a control field. It can also be a free field. So in this case, I'm going to put Jeff in there. And then I am going to tell you explicitly where that transcription can be found. Now, generally, this is a network drive location, and I'm telling you where to find that within the archives as the archivist. Okay. When did Jeff transcribe it? Let's say he was really quick and he transcribed it the next day or on the 28th. We will get the transcription date in here. Generally, the review date could be days, weeks, months later, could be quite a bit later, and could be a whole year later, okay? So generally, we won't use that, but you can if you want. Okay, so that handles this tab, the oral history tab, screen view in this case, I'm sorry. So I'm going to go back up and hit save. You'll notice we don't use restrictions here. We put that somewhere else. Okay, next tab. Now, let's go ahead and fire this up, the custom tab. Depending on what your organization is and what it does, will determine what you place here. Now, along with your PastPerfect administrator, you can designate what these fields hold. And you're going to want to do that, and you can change those up in the settings, up in the main menu. But you're definitely going to want to have a discussion with other people in your organization as you do this. So as an organization, as the Veterans Museum for Wisconsin, we decided that we wanted unit names, and that's one way to call it. So I'm going to do edit, click in, and I'm going to do a cut and paste. In this case, it's a Marine unit. So, but it could also be, and they could also be stationed on this, they could also be on a ship, okay? And you could have multiple things here. It could be a building, it could be a location. In this case, it's particularly of value. Here, I'll give you another one here, an Army one. Not that you care, maybe you do. It could be any number of things, a series of things. This helps us figure out who this person is and gives us a little bit more data about them that we find valuable. In our case, another qualifier or category here, it could be one of the branches of service, Army, Navy, Marines, Space Force. In this case, we're going to mix and match. MOS is a military term for mission, occupation, specialty. Basically what they do while they're in the military. So we're going to go 11 Bravo, which is an infantryman in the Army, but it could also be a baker. It could be, it could be a Navy rate, boatswain. I'm going to murder this, I think. You could have a aviation electrician. Basically have anything in there in this case. It's allowed. So that helps us understand what they did in whatever unit it was. So that's of value to us. Moving on, and you'll notice I'm moving from upper left around here to right. One of the more valuable fields that we really leverage is our external link field. So in our case, we use the external link field in the catalog to point to those collections outside of PastPerfect that we want it to look at. And I do realize there's another way of doing this, but this works for us. So in this external link field, you can use HTML, which is hypertext markup language, which is the web's language, to point to other objects. So the first one we're going to do, and I just cut and pasted from off screen, is I'm going to point, in this case, to our OHMS site. And OHMS stands for Oral History Metadata Synchronizer. And it's valuable. It's a player. I'll show you it later, but this allows us to go directly from the catalog into the player. Okay, let's say they have a standalone transcript. Okay, I'm going to cut and paste in there. You'll see another URL reference. And all this does is point to that PDF from the catalog. Okay. You'll notice I use a break in here, BR, that gives us the spacing between. You'll also notice that I use the word audio, and in this case, the word transcript. But it could be anything to basically tell the user, click here to go to the transcript, or click here to listen to the audio. That's the purpose of this, and that's why we do it. So good field here, really valuable field. There is another place to do that in PastPerfect, but this is what works for us at this time. So if you happen to do worldcat.org in OCLC, we have a field for that. I've made up some numbers there, by the way. You could also do any number of archives fields here for things that are of value to you, okay? Because you may not do OCLC, and that's fine. In our case, we also do, let's say we rolled out for Jill, let's see here, We did a social media post on the 3rd somehow, and that tells us that we posted something on the 3rd regarding her collection. Okay, so this handles for us our custom field data. And what you'll want to do, like I mentioned at the beginning of this field, or screen view, I'm sorry, is talk to your PastPerfect administrator and design out, okay, we want this field to show. The objects people are telling me we don't want to use that field. The book people are telling me this. The photograph people are telling me don't use that field, but this would be a value. Definitely discuss it in advance. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. You'll notice that this little thing goes green. That means something's there. I'm going to keep going to the other screen views. Okay. In oral history, we don't use appraisal for the most part. We generally don't use condition. We don't use container list. Lexicon, this is what was populated earlier when we chose that object name oral history. And that pre-populated these categories and classifications for us, which makes it a lot easier. So you don't have to do anything here. Location. So in our case, we've agreed upon a certain naming protocol. So I'm going to go to home location. I'm going to click edit, click back down into it to make it yellow, I'm sorry. And in our case, we use the first two. Now you can organize this any way you want to, but the way we use it is we do the building and the shelf number first. We do them in one set, and you'll recognize this from earlier. Okay, there we are. And then I'm going to go to room, even though it's not a room, and I'm going to tell you where it is, that it's in a box and it's in container 10, location number 10. This we'll hit save, and I want you to watch up here. It'll hit the home location, and you'll notice it throws a colon in between these two. That's the division between these two fields. And that's the home location of the original. And where this comes in valuable later is if you're putting stuff on loan, you will generate a location history of materials coming in and going out of the collection. Okay, for us, it's primarily the value is pointing to where that location is. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to be done with the location tab. You'll notice no green button shows up here. I'm not sure why that is. That's okay. The next important fields that we use are the legal status and the notes field. Now, the legal status is if there is a particular restriction on this oral history. There's some reason why the individual doesn't want it released. There could be any number of things. So these are internal facing, and they're notes to the archivist. So I'm going to click in here, legal status. I'm going to click edit. And in our case, I've got a couple examples here. I'm going to do 3 years from restriction of any publication of any kind. Check back on publication in 3 years from now, which would be actually something like that. Okay. It could be different than that. There could be nothing. Generally, if the field is unpopulated in our protocol, that means there are no restrictions. The other thing to point out here quickly and related, but we're going to come back to it, is if you have a legal status that's a restriction of some sort, one of the possible techniques that you can use that works for us is you go back up here to the top field, go into status, and you're going to right click. And in our case, we're going to mark it restricted just for grins and giggles here. 2 left clicks. Okay, and I'm going to hit save. And you'll notice this turns red. Okay, and we're going to just leave, in this case, we're going to leave Jill restricted for now and just leave it as such. But you could have any number of things in this field. And the important point is if there's something legally going on, this is where you want to put it. In this case, no restrictions. Get rid of the extra carriage return again. Full rights, no restrictions, or just leave it empty. There may be a reason why we say this again as well. So just be aware of that. The notes field on the left are internal notes for the archivist. You could put an address, you could put information that you don't want going out, some internal type of note about the collection you would place here in the notes. And just notice the web right thing here, we don't use that as of yet. So I'm going to go ahead. This usually doesn't get used or very little, both the notes and the legal status, but it's not unusual. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Notice the restriction comes back, the legal status stays. So we're going to go on to the next most important tab in our case, or screen view. In this case, we're going to use people, subjects, classification, and search terms. So we're going to skip over people at this time, and we're going to come back to the people record. So the first one I'm going to go to is subjects. Okay. One of the things to understand, though I'm showing this to you pretty quickly in short order, is this could take, you could take months or weeks. So one of the things that we will do is we will use the Library of Congress subject headings from our OCLC record to populate the subjects field here. So the way you do this, of course, if you happen to be doing OCLC, is you copy and paste out the subject headings at the bottom of the record into a text file, and then it cleans it up nice. Excuse me. And I'm going to do a cut and a paste. Okay. And this will give me my Library of Congress subject headings populated and already there. So it makes it a lot easier. So we found that workflow technique works well for us. Okay. Classification we don't use. Search terms we pretty much don't use. It's been replaced by other things. So I'm going to hit save for now. So if you look here carefully, you'll see there's nothing here in people. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and look. And this is just a work technique that I find works really good for us. And we're going to create a people record so that we can link Jill's oral history to other objects within the collection. So let's say she has objects she's donated, we can link to them. Let's say she has a book that she's written, the book is in the library collection, we can link to it. Same with photographs, we can also then link out to them. So I'm going to make sure this record is saved for the moment, and I'm going to look at Jill K. Smith's name, and hopefully, well, in this case, we will assume that is her full name, Jill K. Smith. So I'm going to exit. This takes me back out to the main menu. I'm going to go to People and Biographies. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for another Jill K. Smith. And the reason is, of course, I don't want to create a duplicate record. Okay? And there's a couple ways of doing this. There's a bunch of different ways of doing this. So one of the ways you can do it is you can click on, in this case, this is a people record. Again, notice the moving through the records is the same way. Browse in a grid field, edit, find, query is just what it sounds like. I'm going to query on it, hopefully. Now, this is where things get a little tricky, but really they're not. I'm going to go last name in this case, or family name. That's the field I'm looking for. And I want to contain the text. So I'm going to choose the condition. It's good that you learn this anyways. And I'm going to type in her family name, in this case, her surname, Smith. Okay. Now I'm going to hit add to statement. It's going to add it. You'll see the filter, and I'm going to run the query that we just created over here on our people. Okay. Okay. So this is probably not easy to see, but if you can look down here, you'll see Betty Smith, Harry Smith, Thelma Marlene Smith, and Joan Z. Smith. Okay. I have no Jill K. Smith. So in this case, I'm good to go. Let's look at it a different way. I'm going to exit. This just brings me back. We want to abandon the results. And I'm going to go to browse over here. Okay. Now, if you look here on the left, you can see there's a bunch of names listed. And again, there's no Jill Smith. You want to access one of these records and look at it, just right click on it. Okay. Here's Betty Smith, and she even has a photograph. Good. Okay. So, sorry, we're going to go back. I'm going to exit out of the people records because both browsing and looking, I see no other Jill K. Smiths. So I'm going to back out. I'm going to get exit, which takes me out. Again, this is a work technique that I find works for me. So I'm going to go to archives because that's where our oral histories sit. Okay. I'm going to go, oh yeah, Jill K. Smith. Oh yeah, she's restricted, but I'm still working on her. Okay. And I'm going to go back to the people records, people subjects classification. And in this case, I am going to hit edit and I'm going to type in here. And in this case, I am going to do like this. Family name, space, I'm sorry, family name, comma, space, first name, middle initial. And yeah, you're going to have exceptions to this. And I'm going to hit return or enter for us older people. And I'm going to hit save. Okay. Now, what that just did is that just created a people record. And you're going to have different naming protocols that you agree upon. I get that. This is just one possibility. You're going to do view biographies. So you'll notice also that this little thing, this little folder up here showed up. Okay. And that's what you want to use. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And you'll notice Jill's name comes up here, Smith Jill K. Now, what this does, if you just look, it took us over to people and biographies. Okay. It just created the linkage to the people record. And that's really what we want to do. Okay. Because that gives us a lot of opportunities here. So in this case, we're going to do the same naming. I'm going to hit edit again. Jill, our naming protocol is space and then middle initial and then that. And then her last name or family name in this case is Smith. Okay, if she had other names, it could be a maiden name, whatever the name is, or a complete renaming. That happens as well too. You may find that here. You want to put that here. And the reason is because PastPerfect will allow you to search those names as well, and it will find them. So you want to make sure you populate it. It could also be a nickname. Let's say her name is Jill, and for whatever reason, she goes by Jane. And then the surname, you just want to make sure you populate this. In this case, we can take the family name off of here, or married name, whatever you want to call it. So it gives you a lot of variability to come at that person from different ways. If just to show you some of the stuff here, and you use the people record to populate what you have and what you're able to put in there to the degree that you're able to. So let's say she was born in 1956. If we have this, in our case, we agreed to city and state, if I can spell Minnesota. She's still alive. And in our case, we populate this with what we know. Now, one of the neat things about populating the people feature is you can have other people from other collections come in and add their data, okay? Which you may not know. John Smith, okay, let's just say German, that might be, yeah, let's say she's German, okay. A role, we generally don't use this. This has professions, we generally stay away from that. If you know their spouse or partner's name, any children, if they have that, if they're there, they're relevant. Spheres of study, books or publications that they've written, education. This could be anything. Relationships to other people, just basically any biographical information that you want can go in there. One of the things that we do also as a work technique is we write a small bio sketch, which is about 2 at the minimum, 3 to 4 sentences. And we will write that within the oral history program, we'll write that for the veteran, and that will go in this notes section. And that's probably pretty good, okay? So he could also have, or she could have, any number of titles or honors, PhD, whatever the case is. Again, within your museum or your organization, library, archives, you're definitely going to want to agree upon how your place name structure lays out. So that's the catalog record for the biographical. And I'm going to hit save just because I don't want to lose anything. And you'll notice there's 3 buttons here, okay, and they're each important. So we just filled in the biographical information. The other thing you can do here, moving to the custom field within the biographical, is you have a lot of opportunities if you want specific forms of biographical data. You can put demographic information in here, whatever you feel is appropriate. And you're going to want to talk to your PastPerfect administrator and your organization as a whole to decide what fields you want to use and which ones you do not. They're going to vary completely. So that's the custom field. The first one's the biographical field. Again, what'll happen is this will be a clearinghouse. You'll have your photos people, your objects people. They'll come into here and they'll say, well, I know she did this, pre-military or post-military, and she wrote this book and put it in here. So it's kind of a nice clearinghouse. Now, where this comes together is if you go over here to catalog records. And if you go to catalog records here, you'll see there's a little A in front of here for archives, and then oral history, and the title. You can customize this view however you want. And then the description. So what will happen and what happens at our museum is you will have not only an oral history, if you do, you will have photographs, you will have maybe archival objects, you will have physical objects, and there will be a list with all different manuscripts, all the different types here. So it acts as a nice clearinghouse for that individual. It gives us a focal point. And generally, it could be one object, it could be 2, it could be 20 different objects in addition to the oral history. And the key here is that when we catalog something, you'll notice if you look here very carefully at the top, you'll see there's a list. This is just a browse view of people's biographies, objects, photos, archives, and library. So there's one here. We'll go look at it. But you notice we only have one. So the key, again, why I came back and searched, if there was an existing Jill K. Smith, I could link to her directly from the oral history record from that little folder in the corner without adding a new person. And that's very important. So let's look at one here. I'll show you one. They've provided us with some examples. So we'll just go look at some archival collection here. Okay, here it is. So here you have an object for O, A for archival, P for photographic. So this is just a quick example of the thing, just a couple of things within it. They really haven't populated. Sometimes people they just get the name in here. At least you have a marker for that person going forward. So we find that the people biography works really well for us to make sure we're crossing. We're going to exit. Again, if there was already a Joe K. Smith, you just go to this. You'd look to populate it first. The other thing is you can associate it from the other side, but this is straightforward. The important thing is you're aware that there's a possible linkage there. That's the important thing you understand today. Okay, we're going to keep going down these screen views here pretty quickly. In this case, we don't use any related publications. What'll happen with the session, it'll get populated in our case by our registrar, who's our PastPerfect administrator. She'll come back in and she'll generate the session for us. Virtual exhibits, we don't use that. Actions of use, set up links, we don't use that. So the next thing we're going to do quickly here is we'll go back out to the archive view. This is the classic value view that I like. We're going to go ahead and add an image. Okay, so the value of this is in your collection or in your catalog, you can then see the individual. Okay, and that's of some value. So we're going to go to image management. Again, you're on any of the views, sorry about that. And we're going to click this little tab here called image management, no image. Okay, and this will open up a screen for PastPerfect. And I'm going to attach an image. So I'm going to go to this little blue folder in my upper right. Now, a couple considerations here. You're going to want to discuss within your archives, library, or museum how you do this. You might do the pull from your photographs collection on a shared drive. One of the things to also keep in mind is, or you might not, the other thing to keep in mind is generally, unless you tell it, PastPerfect will pull that photo to that collection. And if you tell it to, when you export your database, the PastPerfect database, if you were to do that, it will take the photo with it. So it makes a copy. In this case, for the archivists in the group, we're talking about access here. We're not generally talking about TIFF collections. We're talking about, things that are easy to link to. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And let's see here. I am going to pull up one here. Sorry. We're going to pick up this one, Chronomaker. I'm going to hit open. Okay. Not perfect, but that's okay. This is her image. And we generally, let me move this over. We generally don't enter a caption. We have a set of metadata with this, who created it, when they created it. Generally, as a rule, we will leave it as is. And in this case, it's because we have an existing, a separate photo collection within the oral history collection. Okay, and it's pretty limited. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Okay, and that will link the image. And depending on your settings, it might make a copy of it for PastPerfect when it backs up the database. And the relevant thing here is the metadata information. And I am going to edit this. So we use the existing metadata. We don't add a caption. We're not adding a copyright per se in this case. But we do want it to show up in that publicly facing catalog collection. So I'm going to click this button down here, this edit button, and I'm going to say include in web, and I'm going to click on that. You'll also note in this case, yeah, it's a JPEG, so we're not attaching a massive file here, just an access file. So I'm going to hit save. I'm going to close, and then I'm going to hit this red button. Now, granted, there's a whole bunch of edit functions in here. We generally don't use them. We will do the editing and the sizing well before we get to this point. So I'm going to go ahead and exit, and you'll notice her image appears in the upper right. So this helps both for the archivist and for the public who's interested in the collection. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going at this, and we're getting done. So we've got everything in, we've got the photos in, we've got an archival record, oral history record, a custom record, all the information that we think we need for our oral history. So in my case, one of the work techniques that I use is I literally look at the entire record and decide, is it ready to go or not? So I start in the top left and I just go through the record. So in this case, I'm going to look at this quickly while I'm talking to you. And then I'm going to go, oh, Jill's record is no longer restricted. So we're going to unrestrict her. Now in this case, let's just delete that. We're going to leave it blank for a second. And I'm going to put the status date, which in our case, we use the date of review, which is today. Okay. And status by, so this could be anyone. It doesn't have to be me. It could be anyone coming along and looking at this. They're going to update the status. And then in our case, we use our middle initial and our last initial. We throw that on there. Okay. And I'm not ready. I'm not done with status yet. So I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to look carefully at this, flip through these, look at these quickly. And in this case, it's a dummy record anyways. I'd want the time and amount of gigabytes here. I'm going to look at the oral history record. We don't use IDs for our narrator's number. We just don't. Custom, in this one, it's interesting because she was a Marine, maybe she served on a ship, and apparently at some point she was in the Army. Okay, great. That's that. We did a local social media post. Okay. I'm just going to go to the green tabs that I know are populated. She's restricted, and I'm going to come back to today, and I'm going to say, I might document my decision. I might also just delete the field above. I'll put in here what I did. Because I called her on the phone, and she said, yeah, I'm fine with it going out. Okay, good. So we updated the legal status. Notice I'm still in edit mode this whole time. So I don't need to save. I'm going to come back up here. I am going to do one last thing. Okay, so I'm ready for it to go out to the public. I'm happy with the record. Everything is good. So there's what's called, if you have it, PastPerfect Web Export, which allows you to place the material online, in this case, PastPerfect Online. And so those exports, as they happen, when your PastPerfect administrator does them, they will go out every month, however they've set it up. And you'll want to discuss that with them. But in order for it to go out publicly facing, in this case, I'm going to hit this check mark here, which tells the registrar or the PastPerfect administrator this is ready to go. And you can do that and undo that as you go. And I'm going to change her status. In our case, we use the term processed because she is done. Okay, so I'm done. I've checked the web export, and then I'm going to hit save, and that will update the record. Okay, and that will update it in the database. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to show you what some examples of this looks like. Let's try here, or attempt to. Bear with me. Okay, so you should be able to see that. Your screen sharing is paused. Resume share. Let's see here. Resume share. What the heck? Hold on a moment. Let's see here. Let's go like this. Let's do this. One of the interesting things about PastPerfect 5 is it seizes the entire screen. So when you try to do a screen share, and I will show you this here quickly, or attempt to. Let's see here. Share screen. Let's go here. Okay. And then let's go here. Hopefully you all can see that. I think you can. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so these are some live oral histories that we happen to have sitting out here. And I'm going to go ahead and click on Laura Naylor. These are all veterans of Wisconsin veterans. I'll click her name real quick, and hopefully this will come up. What this is doing is this is web linking out, you can see. So this is our PastPerfect online, in this case, our subdomain that's set up from them. This is our icon, our header. Okay, now, if you remember the stuff we just went through, this is the collection name, the ID number, object name, what we call it. In this case, she was part of Faces in the Sand, the date she interviewed, the length of the interview, what event was significant, who the narrator was, who the interviewer was. Short description in this case. Here's the extent and medium that we looked at, the MP4 files in this case, and a transcript. Reproduction rights, so on and so forth. So one of the neat things that we can do from the external links field I was showing you is we can click on this, and this will take us out.
And I actually found,
and I'm not sure if you can hear her or not, but you can go ahead. This is Ohms in this case. So you can go out and listen, and in this case, view her oral history. We have some other examples here. Let's look at Rose Kerstetter, sorry. And she'll have some other things here. It takes a minute for, hopefully it works. Here's Rose, and she's a World War II veteran. And in her case, she has both, she has an audio, which is this. Come on. I'm not sure if you can hear that or not, but the audio is playing. And her voice is really quiet, unfortunately, in this case. And the other thing we can do, sorry, yikes, get this thing out of the way, is we can go back. And if she happens to have a transcript, in this case, a PDF file, if you like the traditional transcript, we have it this way. We also have it if you want the PDF to populate within Ohms, we have that. So we have multiple ways of pulling up the interview. Let's see here. So we have this, we have Violet Armstrong, her service during the Cold War. We have a very in-depth description. And in her case, we have the audio. Let me show you another example here. The other thing you can have happen is within that simple oral history record, you can have multiple images that in this case he donated. And in this case, it was just audio. So a lot of these are just audio and there's no video component to them. So
today is November 26, 2019, and this is an interview with.
And that we're just linking out to ohms in that case. So there's a bunch of different ways of doing that. And we're not going to go through all these. You could have any object sitting at the end of that external link. Okay, that wraps it up. What are your questions that you have?
A great presentation, Luke. You must have did a fantastic job because we only had a couple questions.
Okay, more questions. Good.
You're probably going to go back to your PastPerfect screen because the questions that we have deal exactly with that.
Okay, so let me get there. Hold on.
Sure.
Yeah, that was a little bit tricky, and that's just the nature of PastPerfect, and that's for that screen in particular. Let's go like this. And hopefully you should see this. It'll take a second to fire up. Okay.
Perfect. The first question is, somebody wants to know if you can click on the status field so they can see your options.
Sure, absolutely. So just a couple things you should be aware of. You can customize these fields. So depending on your organization, you may decide you want to do something else. So for documenting your workflow. So in our case, I actually added this process because that's what we use. So right click, I'm going to try to get out of the way here. Conservation, deaccession, hazardous, lost, missing, need to photograph. Sometimes you'll see people just do okay. We kind of have gone more to processed. On loan, pending repatriation, all kinds of stuff where it's being restored or it's being conserved, all kinds of, different techniques. Any other?
The next question, Luke, is where do you place the military rank designations?
Aha, great question. Excellent question. So in our case, we don't. We have chosen as a museum, we don't, because what we find is the veteran serves throughout time and their rank changes. You might find it mentioned in the description, but generally we stay away from it. We try to.
And then the last question we have, Luke, is what is the difference between PastPerfect's oral history management and ohms?
Okay, great question. So you understand, ohms, which is the oral history metadata synchronizer, is been kindly given to us by the University of Kentucky and Doug Boyd, and it is available to the public. And it is a separate, standalone, available to the public free player that allows you to play audio and video. It has nothing to do with PastPerfect. PastPerfect is a separate product, and they're not connected.
Well, Luke, that's all the questions that we have. Like I said, you must have done a fantastic job in all your descriptions. Everything must have been crystal clear. In case there are any follow-up questions for any of our registrants and our participants today, just let you know that you will be able to find this on our YouTube channel. We should have it up probably within the next couple days or so. Our education department has a pretty quick turnaround on getting our programs up to our YouTube channel. So if there's anything that you want to review from this presentation today, you can certainly go back to our YouTube channel in a couple days and find that. Or you can get more information from Mr. Sprague by contacting him here at his work phone number or his work email. We do have one last question. Robin says, I didn't see you enter anything in a contact field. Is there a reason for only putting in people?
Is there a reason for only putting in people? In the context field, I'm sorry, I'm trying to understand.
Contact field.
In the contacts field. Let me see if I can bring it up here. Contacts field. Are we talking about people records? Or I'm having a difficult time understanding where we're talking about in PastPerfect.
Well, actually, Luke, if you could bring up your contact information screen, and I will just direct Robin to that. And
My
you can answer
contact
the question offline.
Okay.
I think that would probably help.
Okay. Okay, great. I'll be happy to answer it.
Excellent. So yeah, Luke's going to bring up his contact information screen again. And like I said, you can contact him either via his work phone number or his work email, which you see listed there. And then just to remind everybody, once again, this will be put up on our YouTube channel. Like I said, it should be up by Wednesday or Thursday. So if you want to go back and review this program for any information you might have missed or for any of the specifics, you can certainly do that. Luke, thanks again for putting this on today. We had a lot of participants in here today, and it looked like it was some really good information. Everybody was really interested in what you were doing today. And I would just like to also thank the Wisconsin Veterans Museum Foundation once again for helping us put on these free programs. I hope everybody has a great Monday. Don't forget to go to our website and look at our upcoming events. We have trivia night coming up next week. We also have a couple book authors coming in this month to speak about their new works. So you can definitely sign up for those programs. And please just look forward to any of our future programs that we have coming up in the museum. Luke, thanks again, buddy.